The moment my phone rang that afternoon, I didn't think much of it until I saw who was calling. It was Claire, the cleaning lady I had hired for the first time that day. Her voice on the other end was trembling, shaky, and almost whispering. "Ma'am," she said, breathing fast, "I think there's someone in your house." At first, I thought she was joking or mistaken. "What do you mean someone's in my house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. But then she said, something that made my stomach twist. "I can hear footsteps upstairs. Heavy ones. I swear, I locked the front door after I came in." Tell me honestly, what would you do if someone called you saying there's someone inside your house when you're miles away and alone? I was at my office downtown, about 30 minutes away from home. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday. Work, emails, coffee, the usual. My husband, Ryan, was out of town for a construction conference, and our 2 kids were at school. I'd hired the cleaning lady because, honestly, between work and parenting, our house had turned into a disaster zone. Claire came highly recommended from a local service, and she sounded sweet over the phone when we arranged everything. I gave her the garage code and told her where to find the supplies. I never imagined that just 2 hours later, I'd be gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles would turn white, listening to her whisper that someone was inside. "Claire, listen to me," I said, my voice shaking now too. "You need to get out of the house, okay? Go outside, get into your car, and lock the doors." But she didn't answer. For a moment, all I heard was silence, then a faint creak, the sound of a floorboard. And then, her terrified voice again. "He's upstairs. I think he knows I'm here." My heart dropped. I stood up from my desk so fast that my chair toppled over. My coworkers turned to look at me, but I couldn't explain. My mind was spinning. I yelled into the phone, "Claire, get out now!" But then the call cut off. I don't even remember grabbing my purse or keys. I just remember running. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely start the car. I called 911 while driving, my voice a mess of words. "There's someone in my house. My cleaning lady is inside. She said someone's there." The dispatcher was calm, collected. She told me officers were on their way. But 30 minutes felt like an eternity when you think someone might be inside your home. The drive home was a blur of red lights, honking cars, and pure panic. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Could it have been a neighbor checking in? A delivery guy? No, she said, he, a stranger. My thoughts jumped to Ryan's tools. He always kept a hammer in the garage, a crowbar by the basement. What if the intruder had found them when I finally turned onto my street? I saw the flashing blue and red lights of 2 police cruisers parked outside my house. I slammed the car door and ran toward them before they could even say a word. "Is she okay? Is she still inside?" I asked, almost shouting. One of the officers, a tall man with a stern but kind face, held up his hand to calm me down. "Ma'am, we're checking the property now. Please stay back." But how could I stay back? This was my house. My home. I could see the front door slightly ajar, something I knew Claire would never leave open. Every creak, every shadow felt amplified. I stood there, my heart pounding. So hard I could feel it in my throat while the officers entered. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, one of them came back outside with Claire. She looked pale as a ghost, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling. I ran to her and hugged her before I even said a word. "Are you hurt?" I asked. She just shook her head. "No, but he was really there." That sentence sent chills down my spine. The officer guided her to the curb and asked questions while the others continued checking inside. I sat beside her, trying to make sense of it. "What happened?" I asked softly. She swallowed hard, her voice still shaking. "I was cleaning the kitchen, and then I heard footsteps upstairs. I thought maybe your husband had come home early, so I called out. But then..." She paused, her eyes wide with fear. I heard a door slam upstairs. When I looked at the staircase, I saw a shadow move. A man's shadow. I froze. Did you see his face? She shook her head. No, he stayed near the hall. I just saw the shape of him. Tall, broad shoulders. I panicked. I called you, and then I heard him coming down the stairs. That's when I ran to the laundry room and hid in the closet. My stomach churned. Someone had been walking freely inside my home, while my things, my kids' photos, my memories were right there. I glanced at the front door again, at the faint scratch marks around the handle. Something wasn't right. The police searched every room, every closet, even the attic. They didn't find anyone. No one's here now, the officer said when he came back out. But the back door was unlocked. Do you usually leave it that way? No, I said immediately. Never. We always lock it. Always. That's when he nodded slowly, writing something in his notebook. Whoever it was probably left through the backyard before we got here. Claire started crying again, and I felt tears burning behind my own eyes. The officer told me to stay somewhere else for the night, just to be safe. But I couldn't leave. This was my home, and some stranger, had just violated it. After the police left, I offered Claire a ride home. She didn't want to be alone either. The whole drive was quiet until she suddenly whispered, "Ma'am, before I hid, I saw something." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, biting her lip. The man, he wasn't wearing a mask or anything, but I saw something in his hand. It looked like a key. I frowned. A key? What kind of key? She nodded. A house key. He had it in his hand, like he used it to get in. My mind went blank. How would a stranger have a key to our house? Only 3 people had one. Me, Ryan, and my mom, who lived 2 states away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that key, about the shadow she saw, about how the police didn't find anyone, but someone had clearly been there. I checked every lock twice, closed every curtain, and still felt like I was being watched. The next morning, when I went downstairs to make coffee, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The framed photo of our family that used to sit on the mantel was gone. In its place was another frame, face down. When I picked it up and turned it over, it was the same photo, but someone had cut my face out of it. That's when I realized this wasn't just a break-in. Someone had been watching us. Someone who knew us. Tell me, what would you have done if you found out the intruder might not have been a stranger at all? Would you move? Call the police? Again? Or stay to find out who had the key to your house? I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I heard the faint buzz of my phone still in my hand. I looked at the screen. Call ended. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it echoing inside my skull. I felt paralyzed, caught between disbelief and panic. Did she really say someone was inside my house? How could that be? My doors were locked, every window sealed. I lived in a decent neighborhood, quiet, safe. I didn't even know how to process that kind of fear. I called her name again. Maria? Hello? But no response. I tried calling back, once, twice, 3 times, straight to voicemail. That silence felt deafening. I don't even remember standing up. I just found myself grabbing my keys and running out of my office, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. Driving home felt like I was moving through molasses. Every red light lasted an eternity. My thoughts kept looping. What if someone broke in? What if she was hurt? What if it wasn't a burglary at all, but something far worse? I didn't want to admit it, but my gut was screaming that something about her voice didn't sound like she was just scared. It sounded like she was terrified. That primal kind of terror when you see something that shouldn't be possible. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. Everything looked perfectly normal from the outside. The curtains were still drawn halfway, the front door untouched. No broken glass, no open windows. But that almost made it worse. Because if everything looked normal, then where was Maria? I stepped inside slowly, calling out, "Maria, it's me. Are you here?" My voice sounded small and shaky. I moved through the hallway cautiously. The faint smell of lemon cleaner hung in the air, mixed with something else, something faintly metallic that made my stomach twist. I walked into the living room. The vacuum cleaner was still running in the corner, bumping lightly against the wall, like she'd dropped it mid-use. Her cleaning caddy was tipped over, rags and sprays scattered. And then I saw it. Her phone, lying face down on the floor. The back cover cracked. That's when the panic hit full force. Something happened. Something bad. I wanted to call the police right away, but I was so scared of what they might find. Or worse, what if they didn't find anyone? What if I was walking into a trap? My heart was racing. I picked up the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a metal candle holder, and made my way upstairs, step by step, every creak of the wood echoing like thunder. At the top of the stairs, everything was silent. Too silent. My bedroom door was half open, and I could see that the light was on. "Maria?" I whispered. Nothing. I pushed the door open, bracing myself for anything. But the room looked untouched. Bed neatly made, blinds closed, everything in place. I turned toward the bathroom, and that's when I saw something that made my skin crawl. The bathroom door was also slightly open, and inside on the tile were wet footprints. Bare feet, not mine. I froze. My chest tightened. I couldn't hear anything, but I felt someone else's presence. My instincts screamed at me to get out, to run. I slowly backed away, but the floorboard creaked under my heel. And in that split second, I swore I heard a soft, sharp inhale from behind the bathroom door. I didn't even think. I bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping over the vacuum cord, and ran outside. I called 911 with trembling fingers, my voice shaking as I explained everything. The dispatcher was calm, reassuring. "Stay outside. Officers are on their way." I could barely breathe as I stood there in my driveway, eyes glued to the front door, terrified that at any second someone might walk out. The 5 minutes it took for the police to arrive felt like an hour. When they finally showed up, 2 officers with flashlights and calm, professional voices, I explained everything. Maria's call, her scream, the silence. They moved quickly through the house while I waited outside, pacing and clutching my phone. Every sound, every shadow felt like it could be them. I didn't even realize how cold it had gotten until I felt my teeth chattering. After what felt like forever, one of the officers came out. His expression was serious, but off somehow. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "we checked the entire house. No one's here." I blinked, confused. "What? But her phone is inside." The vacuum was running. "She called me. She said someone was in the house." He nodded, holding up a hand. "We found her cleaning supplies, yes. But there's no sign of her or anyone else. Nothing appears stolen or broken." My mind was spinning. That's impossible. She wouldn't just disappear. He looked at me sympathetically. Sometimes people panic and run. Maybe she thought she saw something. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But that didn't explain the footprints in my bathroom. When I mentioned them, both officers exchanged a quick glance before one went back inside to check again. After a few minutes, he returned and shook his head. "Nothing there now." That sent a chill through me, because I knew what I saw. The prints were there, wet, fresh, unmistakably real. But they were gone now, as if someone had wiped them away. They took my statement, told me to call if I heard from her, and left. And just like that, I was alone again in that house that suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. I sat on the couch for hours, staring at her phone on the coffee table. I didn't want to touch it, but eventually I picked it up. The screen was cracked, but it still turned on. There were several missed calls, to me, and one last outgoing message that never sent. It was typed but unsent, frozen mid-sentence. It read, "He's not supposed to be..." That was it. Nothing more. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. I kept replaying that voicemail in my mind. her trembling voice saying, "There's someone in your house." Those words didn't just sound scared, they sounded confused. Like she wasn't sure what she was seeing. By the next morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. I went to the cleaning agency to ask about her. The lady at the front desk looked at me blankly when I mentioned her name. "Maria, which one? We have a few." I showed her the text confirmation for my appointment. She frowned. "This number doesn't belong to our staff." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I booked through your website." She checked the records again and shook her head. "There's no appointment under your name. And this phone number, it's not one of ours." That's when I realized, whoever Maria was, she hadn't come from the agency at all. I left the office with my mind spinning. Had I been scammed? But if it was a scam, why go to my house? Why call me in terror? None of it made sense. I went home again, retracing her steps, trying to make sense of everything. The more I looked around, the more I noticed small, unsettling details I'd missed before. The faint metallic smell from the night before, it was still there, stronger near the basement door. Now, here's the thing. I rarely ever went into that basement. It was mostly storage, old boxes, tools, nothing important. But as I stood there, I felt an odd chill seeping through the crack under the door, like the air below was somehow colder. I reached for the knob, hesitated, then turned it slowly. The door creaked open, and a draft of cold air brushed past me. The basement light flickered on weakly when I flipped the switch, casting long, trembling shadows down the stairs. I descended one step at a time, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. When I reached the bottom, I immediately noticed something off. The boxes weren't where I left them. Someone had moved them. And right there, on the concrete floor, was a single wet footprint. It was the same size, the same shape as the ones I'd seen upstairs. But this time, it led toward the back of the basement, to a small utility door that I'd honestly forgotten existed. I'd never used it. It led to the crawl space beneath the house. My breath caught as I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. My mind raced. Was Maria hiding in there? Was someone else? I was shaking so badly that I could barely hold my phone steady as I dialed 911 again. But before I could press call, I heard it. A faint, deliberate sound from behind that door. A slow, dragging step. Then another. I backed up, pressing myself against the wall, eyes wide, barely breathing. The sound stopped. The silence stretched on until I thought I'd imagined it. Then, from behind the door came a whisper, hoarse, faint, but unmistakably human. "Don't tell them." I dropped my phone. The sound of it clattering on the floor echoed through the basement. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and shoved the kitchen table against it. My hands were trembling as I called the police again, gasping into the phone. When the officers arrived, I could barely speak. They searched the house again, every room, every inch of the basement. When they came back up, one of them looked unsettled. He told me there was no one down there, but the crawl space door had clear signs of being opened recently. Footprints, disturbed dust. And something else. A blanket and food wrappers like someone had been living there. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just a break-in. Someone had been inside my house for who knows how long. And the worst part? The police couldn't find them. That night, I sat on the couch with every light in the house turned on, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Sleep wasn't even an option. I could still hear that voice from the basement whispering, "Don't tell them." It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Cold, calm, like whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing. The police told me to stay with a friend until they investigated further, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. It was my home, my space. And yet, for the first time ever, I didn't feel safe in it. I kept thinking about Maria. The police hadn't found her either. Her number was disconnected now, and when they checked local hospitals, nothing. No records. No missing person reports that matched her description. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. I couldn't stop replaying her last words in my head. "There's someone in your house." What had she seen? Who had she seen? The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit around waiting. I went down to the basement again, this time in daylight. The air was still cold and musty. I stood near that crawlspace door staring at it, half expecting it to swing open again. But this time it stayed still. I crouched down and looked closer. There were scratch marks around the frame, faint but visible, like someone had been trying to close it from the inside. That made my stomach turn. I called a private home security company that same day. Within hours, I had cameras installed all around the property, inside and out. I thought that would give me peace of mind. But that night, when I checked the live feeds before bed, one of the cameras glitched for a second. It was the one in the basement. I brushed it off as a signal issue, but part of me couldn't shake the unease. For the next few days, everything was quiet. Too quiet. No noises, no strange signs. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all, that maybe Maria had some personal issue and ran off. But then, on the fourth night, I woke up at around 2:30 a.m. to a faint creaking sound. It was slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere below me. The floorboards. The basement. I reached for my phone with trembling hands and opened the camera app to check the live feed. My heart stopped. The basement camera showed movement. At first, I thought it was just a flicker. But then I saw it clearly. Someone's silhouette, crouched low, moving behind the storage boxes. I froze. I didn't even breathe. Whoever it was had been there this entire time. I stared at the screen, horrified, as the figure moved toward the corner and then looked directly at the camera. It wasn't a full face, just a flash of pale skin and dark, hollow eyes reflecting the faint light. But that was enough. I screamed, jumped out of bed, and called 911 again. When the police arrived, they went through the same routine: basement, crawl space, every room. But again, nothing, no one. The officer looked at me like I was losing it. "Ma'am, are you sure you saw a person? Could it have been an animal?" "Animals don't stare into cameras," I snapped, my voice breaking. They offered to patrol the area for the night, but deep down I knew whoever it was. They weren't breaking in. They were already inside. After they left, I sat in my car in the driveway, shaking, watching the feed on my phone. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the live footage, the basement door, the one that led upstairs, was slightly open. I hadn't left it that way. That was when I realized I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed a bag and went to stay with my friend Lily across town. She insisted I get a hotel, but I didn't want to be alone. I told her everything, about Maria, the voice, the crawl space. She thought I was traumatized and maybe exaggerating, but she agreed to help me figure out what was going on. We went back to the house the next morning, determined to check every inch together. Lily wasn't scared easily. She was the kind of person who could walk through a haunted house and laugh. But even she looked uneasy as soon as we stepped inside. "It's cold in here," she said, rubbing her arms. And she was right. The air felt wrong, heavier somehow. We started in the basement again. I turned on all the lights, took a deep breath, and opened that crawl space door fully for the first time. It was dark inside, narrow, and smelled of damp earth. Lily crouched down with her phone flashlight and shined it in. "There's something back there," she whispered. I leaned in beside her, squinting. At first I couldn't make out what it was. Then the light hit something metallic, a small rusted tin box. Lily reached in and pulled it out. It was old, dusty, and cold to the touch. We opened it carefully, and inside were a few photographs. The pictures were faded, but they were clearly of my house, years ago. Before I even bought it, in one of them, there was a family standing in front of the fireplace. A man, a woman, and a little boy. None of them looked familiar. But the boy, his eyes were eerily similar to the ones I saw in the camera. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Lily looked uneasy too. "Maybe they used to live here," she said. "Maybe," I replied softly. "But why hide the photos down here?" There was also a folded piece of paper inside the box. It was old and yellowed, like it had been there for decades. In shaky handwriting, it said, "He won't leave the house. No matter what we do, he stays." We stared at it in silence. That's when Lily's flashlight flickered. For a brief second, everything went dark. And in that darkness, we both heard it, soft footsteps above us. Slow, heavy. Someone was walking upstairs. Lily grabbed my arm, eyes wide. "There's no one else here, right?" I could barely speak. "No." We bolted upstairs, hearts pounding, but by the time we got there, the sound had stopped. The house was silent again. Everything looked normal, too normal. We checked every room, even the closets. Nothing, but then Lily pointed at the hallway mirror. "Was that always cracked?" I turned. A long, jagged crack ran down the center of the mirror, like someone had struck it from the inside. That was enough. We left immediately. That night at Lily's, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about that old note, those photographs, and Maria's last unfinished message. He's not supposed to be... What if she had discovered something down there? What if she saw whoever, or whatever, was living under the house? The next day, I decided to go through the property records. I found out that before I bought the house, it had belonged to a family who mysteriously disappeared in the late 1980s. The record said, presumed relocation, but there were no forwarding addresses, no sale documents, nothing. It was like they just vanished. The previous owner before me had bought it at an estate auction, cheap, quick, no questions asked. My blood ran cold as I read the names of that family, the Harrisons. And in one of the old photos from the tin box, I remembered seeing the name Harrison scribbled on the back. Everything started connecting in horrifying ways. That night, I went through the camera footage again. I slowed it down frame by frame. And there, barely visible but undeniably real, was that same silhouette in multiple clips, appearing and disappearing, always near the basement door. Sometimes it would just stand there for hours, perfectly still. I couldn't take it anymore. I contacted a paranormal investigator. I know how it sounds, but at that point, logic had stopped making sense. The man's name was Greg. He'd dealt with cases of hauntings, break-ins, and strange phenomena for years. When he came to the house, he brought equipment, motion sensors, EMF detectors, heat cameras. He didn't laugh at me or dismiss me. He just said calmly, "Whatever's here, we'll find out." We started at night. He placed sensors near the crawl space, the basement stairs, and the hallway. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then, as we were reviewing the feeds, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly, 5 degrees in seconds. Greg's EMF meter spiked. He looked at me and said quietly, "There's movement downstairs." We both turned toward the basement door. It was slightly open again. I swear to God neither of us had touched it. Greg grabbed his flashlight and camera and started recording. "If someone's down there, we're coming in," he said firmly. I followed him down, clutching my phone. The lights flickered as we descended. The crawl space door was wide open this time, and the air was freezing. I could see my breath. Greg aimed his thermal camera into the darkness and froze. "There's a heat signature," he whispered. "Someone or something is in there." I couldn't breathe. We stood there, staring into the darkness, and then, from deep inside the crawl space, came that same hoarse whisper again. "Don't tell them." I dropped the flashlight this time. It rolled across the floor, the beam shaking as it landed on something in the shadows. A pair of bare feet. Pale. Motionless. Greg lunged forward, but before he could reach, the light flickered out completely. The sensors upstairs started beeping wildly. I could hear the sound of footsteps running, above us, around us, like someone circling the house at impossible speed. Then, everything stopped. When the lights came back, the crawl space was empty again. The only thing left behind was the tin box, lying open on the ground. And this time there was a new note inside. In the same shaky handwriting, it said, "He's still here." I couldn't take it anymore. I moved out the next day. I didn't even bother to pack everything, just took what I needed and left. The police did one final sweep and found nothing again. Greg reviewed all his recordings but said some of the footage had been corrupted, files missing, audio distorted. But before I left for good, I checked the footage from that final night one last time. And there, in a single frame, clearer than ever before, was a pale figure standing behind me and Greg in the basement, watching us. Now, here's where I need your opinion. Because I can't stop thinking about Maria, and I can't stop wondering if she's still out there. Or if she's trapped somehow. Maybe she saw him. Maybe she warned me too late. So tell me honestly, what would you have done if you were me? Would you have stayed? Would you have tried to find out who or what was in that house? Or would you have run the moment she said those words, "There's someone in your house"? Because even now, sometimes in the quiet of the night at my new apartment, I swear I still hear that whisper. I wish I could tell you that moving away ended everything, that the moment I handed over my keys and drove away from that house, the nightmare stopped. But it didn't. If anything, the distance only made the silence louder. The first few nights in my new apartment, I barely slept. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the hallway floorboards. My friends told me it was trauma, that I'd been through something deeply disturbing and my brain was still processing it. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to think it was just fear, not something real following me. But deep down, I knew something had changed. A week after I left, Greg, the investigator, called me. His voice was calm but tight, like he was trying not to scare me. I went back to the house, he said. I had to check the crawl space again. Something's not right. My stomach dropped. Why? What did you find? He hesitated before answering. That door? The one under the stairs? It's been nailed shut. I froze. You nailed it shut? No, he said quietly. When I got there, it was already like that. Fresh nails? Someone, or something, closed it from the inside. That sentence echoed in my mind for hours. Closed it from the inside. I didn't want to think about it, but my curiosity, my need to understand, was stronger than my fear. That night, I sat with my laptop, scrolling through every forum, every archived article, every mention of the Harrison family that had lived there before me. Most of it was local gossip, but then I found something that made my blood run cold. A small newspaper clipping from 1987. Local family vanishes. Father under. Investigation for son's disappearance. The article said the Harrisons' 8-year-old son, Thomas, had gone missing one night after being grounded for sneaking into the basement. The father told police the boy ran away, but neighbors reported hearing screams the night he disappeared. The family moved out weeks later, and then vanished too. The case was never solved. That night I dreamed of that little boy. He was standing in the corner of my old basement, pale and silent, staring at me with those hollow eyes. When I woke up, my phone buzzed. A text message. No name, no number, just a single line. You shouldn't have left him alone. I dropped my phone like it was burning me. My hands shook so hard I could barely breathe. I knew it wasn't possible. No one else had my number except Greg and a few friends. But the message, it wasn't random. It was personal. I called Greg right away. Did you text me? I asked. He paused. No, why? I explained, my voice trembling, reading the message out loud. There was silence on his end for a long time. Then he said, "You need to hear this." He told me that after our last visit, he'd gone through his audio recordings frame by frame. And in one of the clips, right before the lights went out, there was a whisper. Not the one we heard in person. Another one. A child's voice, and it said, "Help me." My blood ran cold. I didn't even know what to say. Greg continued, his tone grave. "Whatever's in that house, it's not done. I think that boy never left. For days, I couldn't think about anything else. I tried to go back to work, to act normal, but I'd catch myself staring at blank walls, remembering the shape of those footprints, the smell of metal, the cold breath on my neck that night. It all started making sense. The voice, the old note saying he won't leave, Maria's unfinished text. He's not supposed to be... She must have seen the boy. Or what he had become. And then, one night, I got another call. It was Greg again, but this time he sounded terrified. "You need to come here," he said. I went back to the house with a crew, 2 other investigators. We found something. I didn't want to go, but something inside me told me I had to. I needed closure. I needed to see it for myself. When I arrived, the house looked even emptier than I remembered, like it was rotting from the inside. The windows were fogged over, the grass overgrown. Greg met me outside, holding a flashlight and looking pale. "We opened the crawl space," he said. "You should see this." We went down into the basement, our footsteps echoing in the cold air. The moment we reached the bottom, I felt it again, that heavy, suffocating presence. Greg shined his flashlight on the crawl space door. It was splintered around the nails, as if something had been pounding to get out. He crouched down, pried it open with a crowbar, and aimed the beam inside. The space was small and dark, but now you could see that it went deeper than we thought, like someone had dug further into the earth. We crawled in slowly, the dirt damp beneath our hands. After a few feet, Greg stopped. "Look," he whispered. There, half buried in the dirt, was an old wooden box. He brushed off the soil and opened it. Inside were small objects, a toy car, a baseball, and a faded photograph of a young boy holding a puppy. On the back of the photo, in that same shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "He never left." That's when we heard it. A sound so faint, I almost thought it was the wind. But then it grew louder, a soft humming, like a lullaby, coming from deeper inside the tunnel. Greg pointed his flashlight toward the sound, and for a brief second we both saw him. The boy, pale, thin, eyes hollow and black, standing just a few feet away, watching us. And before either of us could move, he whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." The light flickered, and he was gone. Greg pulled me out of there so fast I barely knew what was happening. We stumbled up the stairs, gasping for air. The house seemed to tremble. As we reached the living room, one of the other investigators screamed from the basement. We ran back to the doorway, but he was gone. The sound stopped. No more humming, no more movement. When the police came again, they found no trace of the missing man. No evidence of anyone else in the house. Greg was shaking as he tried to explain what happened. "They didn't believe us. I didn't go back after that." I couldn't. The house was sealed off a week later, condemned for structural safety reasons. But sometimes, late at night, I still dream of that crawl space, the darkness, the whisper, the boy. And the worst part? Sometimes I hear a woman's voice too. Maria's, calling out for help. I think about her all the time, about how brave she must have been to go in there alone. Maybe she saw the boy, tried to help him, and he didn't understand. Maybe that's why she screamed. Maybe she's with him now. I'll never really know. But I do know one thing. Some houses remember. Some walls hold on to what happened inside them. And sometimes the things we think we've escaped follow us anyway. Because just a few nights ago, as I sat alone in my apartment, trying to convince myself to move on, I heard it again. That faint humming, the same tune from the crawl space. Coming from my hallway, I turned on all the lights, trembling. The air felt cold again. I looked around, heart pounding. No one was there. But when I walked toward the bathroom mirror, I froze. There, in the foggy reflection, were tiny, wet footprints, leading right up to where I stood, and behind me, just for a split second, I saw him again. The boy, staring. Then he whispered, "Don't tell them." The mirror cracked, and the humming stopped. I don't know what's real anymore. Maybe I'm losing my mind, or maybe some doors once opened never really close again. All I know is every time I hear that faint tune, I remember Maria's last words. "There's someone in your house." She was right. There was someone in my house. And now, I think he's in mine. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have tried to help him? Would you have gone back to find the truth? Or would you have run and never looked back? Because sometimes I wish I had. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Like this video if you were on my side, and tell me in the comments what you think really happened that night. Was it something supernatural? Or something worse? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And if you ever hear someone whisper your name in an empty room, whatever you do, don't answer. I'll see you all in the next story.